My twin brother Ethan came to visit me at the psychiatric facility, his face covered in bruises, and his spirit completely broken. When I realized that my niece Charlotte's husband was not only abusing her, but also my own brother, I knew I had to act. So I decided to swap places with him and teach that monster Damien Cross and his family a lesson they would never forget. My name is Evan, and this is the story of how I became my brother's protector. I wonder how many fathers and grandfathers are listening to this right now. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story about protecting family has traveled tonight. Ethan and I are identical twins, as similar as 2 drops of water, but our destinies turned out as different as a storm, and a calm lake as a wolf and a lamb. People said I wasn't right, that I was crazy. The doctor said I had impulse control disorder. I describe it as feeling too much, everything 10 times more intensely than other people. My joy can make my chest explode. My anger, that's what brought me here. The moment Ethan walked through that door, I knew something was wrong. His left eye was swollen shut, purple and black. Fresh cuts lined his knuckles. He favored his right side, broken ribs. Jesus, Ethan, what happened? He tried to smile. You should see the other guy, he joked, but his voice cracked. I'd been locked up in Portland State Hospital for 10 years. When I was 17, I put 3 guys in the hospital for cornering Ethan. The judge called me a danger to society. Maybe he was right. It's Charlotte's husband, Ethan said, slumping into the chair. Damien Cross. He hits Charlotte every day. Now he started on little Avery, too. She's only 3. The chair creaked under my grip. Sweet Avery, a baby I'd only seen in pictures. When I tried to stop him yesterday, he and his family jumped me. His mother, Beverly, his sister, Brenda, they held me down while he used his belt. That familiar fire burned in my chest. But this time it wasn't wild. This time it was focused. I walked to the barred window. 10 years doing push-ups on these bars, reading every book, learning to harness the storm inside me. The doctors thought they were rehabilitating me. They were forging me into something deadlier. Ethan, look at me. Really look. He raised his head. Like looking in a mirror. Same face, same scars, same cowlick. The only difference, I'd gotten stronger while he'd gotten beaten down. We're identical. Nobody could tell us apart. Understanding dawned in his good eye. Evan, no. You can't. Those people are animals. I smiled coldly. Brother, I've been living with animals for 10 years. The difference is these ones are locked up and those ones are running free. I grabbed his shoulders. You'll stay here where it's safe. I'm going out there to handle Damien Cross. I'm going to protect Charlotte and Avery the way I should have been doing all along. For the first time, Ethan's face showed hope. Within an hour, we had switched clothes, IDs, and lives. 20 minutes later, I walked through those hospital doors as Ethan Miller, wearing his threadbare clothes that smelled of fear and defeat. The security guard barely glanced at the discharge papers. The bus ride to East Portland took 45 minutes through neighborhoods that got progressively worse. Cracked sidewalks, boarded windows, dead grass. This was where my brother lived, where my niece was growing up. Number 1247 was a faded blue house with peeling paint and a dirt yard. The mailbox hung crooked. I could smell something rotten from the street. The key turned with a grinding sound. The smell hit me first. Unwashed dishes, stale cigarettes, something sour. The living room was chaos. Clothes thrown everywhere, empty beer bottles, a blaring television. From the kitchen came quiet sounds. Someone trying not to make noise. Then I saw her. Avery sat in the corner behind a laundry basket, almost invisible. She wore a stained pink dress too big for her tiny frame. Her dark hair hung in tangles around a face that should have been bright with mischief. Instead, her eyes held the wariness of someone much older. She looked up and pressed herself further into the corner. "Grandpa," she whispered. My heart shattered. This little girl was afraid of her own grandfather. "Hey there, sweetheart," I said softly, crouching down. "Daddy," a nervous voice called from the kitchen. "Is that you?" Charlotte appeared in the doorway. I barely recognized my niece. The vibrant woman I remembered was now a ghost. Painfully thin, dark circles under her eyes, wearing long sleeves, despite the summer heat. She held a dish towel, like a shield. "Oh," she said with relief, "it's just you, Dad." But even that relief was tinged with fear. She moved like someone expecting to be hit. Shoulders hunched, steps careful. When she bent to pick up a toy, she winced and favored her left side. "How was your appointment?" she asked, not meeting my eyes. The house told their story. Broken toys in corners, scuff marks on walls. No pictures, no decorations, just survival. Charlotte went back to the kitchen, moving like a mouse. Avery remained in her corner with a headless doll, both existing in constant fear, waiting for the next blow. I was processing this nightmare when heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Well, 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 look what the cat dragged back in. Beverly Cross stood in the hallway like a vulture in a floral housecoat, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was heavy with small, mean eyes that swept over the room with disgust. "There you are, you worthless piece of trash," she snarled. "Where the hell have you been all day, sitting around some doctor's office while my son works his ass off to keep a roof over your head?" Charlotte shrank back, and Avery curled up smaller in her corner. They'd heard this before. "Look at this dump." Beverly kicked an empty beer bottle. "No wonder my Damien comes home stressed." Brenda Cross emerged from a bedroom looking like a younger, meaner version of her mother. Behind her trailed a chubby 5-year-old with chocolate around his mouth and an entitled swagger. "Uncle Ethan's back," Brenda announced mockingly. "How nice." The boy, Caleb, immediately zeroed in on Avery. He marched over and snatched her headless doll. "This is stupid," he declared. "Why do you play with broken toys? You're stupid too." "Give it back," Avery whispered. "No finders keepers." He threw it against the wall, then shoved Avery hard enough to knock her over. Charlotte rushed from the kitchen. "Caleb, don't." She dropped beside Avery, pulling her daughter into her arms. "Baby, are you okay?" "Get your hands off him," Beverly barked. "Don't you dare coddle that brat." "She's my daughter," Charlotte said quietly, holding Avery protectively. Brenda stepped forward and grabbed Charlotte's arm, yanking her away. "Your daughter needs to learn to share." "He hurt her." "Shut up." Brenda shoved Charlotte backward. "You don't tell me how to raise my son." Caleb, emboldened, drew back his foot to kick the crying Avery. That's when something inside me snapped. I was across the room before anyone could blink. My hand closed around Caleb's ankle mid-kick. "No," I said quietly. The boy tried to pull away, but my grip was iron. His eyes went wide with shock. "Let go!" he shrieked. "Grandma, Mom!" I held firm. "You don't touch her. You don't take her toys. You don't push her. Understand?" Beverly charged over. "Let go of my grandson. How dare you?" I released Caleb and stood to my full height. Beverly had to crane her neck up, and something in my eyes made her step backward. "Your grandson needs manners." "Don't tell me how to raise my family," she blustered, but her voice had lost its venom. "You're nothing but a freeloader." I took a step forward. She took 2 back. "Things are going to change around here. Starting now." Brenda grabbed Caleb's hand. "Come on, baby. Let's go to Grandma's room." "But I want to play." "Not today," Brenda said quickly, never taking her eyes off me. The 3 of them retreated down the hallway, whispering frantically. A door slammed and locked. Charlotte was still on the floor, holding Avery, staring up at me with wide eyes. "Dad, what's gotten into you?" "You've never stood up to them before." I knelt beside them both. Maybe it's time I started. The house fell into an uneasy silence for the rest of the evening, but I knew this was just the calm before the storm. The rumble of a motorcycle engine cut through the midnight silence like a chainsaw through glass. I'd been lying awake in the cramped living room, using a moth-eaten couch as my bed, listening to Charlotte and Avery's quiet breathing from the back bedroom. The sound I'd been dreading had finally arrived. Damien Cross was home. The engine sputtered and died with a violent cough, followed by the crash of something metal hitting the ground. Probably the bike falling over. Heavy, unsteady footsteps stumbled up the front walk, accompanied by a string of slurred curses that would make a sailor blush. "Goddamn piece of shit bike. Lost again. Fucking cards were rigged." I sat up slowly, every muscle in my body coiled like a spring. This was it. This was the monster who'd been terrorizing my family for years. And he was about to walk through that door, drunk, angry, and looking for someone to hurt. The front door exploded inward with a bang that shook the whole house. Damien Cross filled the doorway like a nightmare made flesh. 6 feet of muscle gone to fat, wearing a grease-stained work shirt and jeans that reeked of beer and cigarettes. His face was flushed red from alcohol, and his small piggy eyes swept the room with the mean intelligence of a predator. Charlotte," he bellowed loud enough to wake the dead. "Where the hell are you? Get me some water." Now, from the back bedroom came the sound of frantic whispering and a child's frightened whimper. Avery had woken up, and she was scared. I said, "Now." Damien kicked over a chair, sending it crashing into the wall. "And what's this old bastard doing sleeping on my couch?" He focused on me with the kind of look a man gives something he's about to step on. In his drunken state, he probably thought I'd cower like I always had before. He was about to learn how wrong he was. "Get up, old man," he snarled, weaving slightly on his feet. "You want to live in my house, you follow my rules. First rule, when I come home you disappear." I stood up slowly, deliberately. At full height, I was only an inch shorter than him, but 10 years of prison conditioning had carved me into something harder than he'd ever be. "Your house," I said quietly. "This is Charlotte's house. She pays the rent." Damien's face twisted with rage. Did you just talk back to me?" He took a stumbling step forward, raising his hand. "I'll teach you some respect, you worthless piece of shit." The slap he threw was wild, telegraphed the kind of sloppy swing that works on frightened women and children. I caught his wrist mid-swing, like catching a slow-pitch softball. "What the—" Damien's eyes went wide with shock. He tried to pull his hand back, but it might as well have been caught in a steel trap. I squeezed, not hard enough to break anything yet, just enough to get his attention. "We need to talk about the new rules around here. Let go of me." He tried to throw a punch with his free hand, but I caught that wrist too. Now I had him completely helpless, both arms trapped swaying on his feet like a scarecrow in a windstorm. "Rule number 1, I said, applying pressure to his right wrist. "You don't hit Charlotte anymore." Crack. The sound of his wrist breaking was sharp and clean, like snapping a dry branch. Damien's scream could have shattered windows. "Rule number 2. I continued as if nothing had happened. "You don't touch Avery. Ever." Before he could scream again, I drove my fist into his solar plexus with surgical precision. All the air left his lungs in a whoosh, and his eyes rolled back in his head. I released his wrists, and he crumpled to the floor like a sack of wet concrete. From down the hallway came the sound of doors slamming and frantic whispers, but Beverly and Brenda were too scared to come investigate. Early the next morning, 2 police officers stood on the front porch, their patrol cars' red and blue lights casting shadows across the neighborhood. The older sergeant held a notebook while his younger partner kept his hand near his weapon. "Are you Ethan Miller?" the sergeant asked. "Yes, sir. I'm Officer Hayes. This is Detective Campbell. We received a complaint about an assault. May we come in?" I stepped aside. Charlotte emerged from the bedroom, clutching her robe, with Avery peeking out behind her legs. Damien sat slumped in a kitchen chair, his right wrist wrapped in a makeshift splint. His face was pale and sweaty. "There he is." Damien pointed with his good hand. "That crazy old bastard attacked me. Broke my wrist for no reason. I want him arrested." Officer Hayes looked between us. "Sir, can you tell us your version?" "I came home from work and he just went crazy." Damien whined. Started grabbing me, twisting my arm. "I think he's having a mental breakdown." Detective Campbell examined Damien's wrist. "This is a serious injury. Mr. Miller, what's your side?" I reached into the kitchen drawer where Charlotte kept important papers. My brother had documented everything. "Officers, before we go further, you should see these." I spread medical reports across the table. Photos of bruises, x-rays of broken ribs, doctor's notes describing injuries consistent with domestic violence. All dated over 2 years, all with Charlotte's name. "These are my daughter's medical records," I said quietly. "Every time he's beaten her." Officer Hayes picked up a photo. Charlotte's face so swollen her eyes were nearly shut. "Jesus Christ. And these are my medical records from yesterday." More photos of violence. He did this when I tried to stop him from hitting my granddaughter. Detective Campbell studied the dates. "Mr. Cross, these records show a pattern going back years. You're telling us this elderly man randomly attacked you." Damien's face went red. "Those are—" "She fell downstairs. She's clumsy." "Multiple times." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "She broke her own ribs falling downstairs." "Look at my wrist," Damien protested. "After you tried to hit him," I said calmly. "In front of witnesses, in his own home, where you've been abusing his daughter for years." Charlotte stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Officers, it's true. Everything in those files. He hits me almost every day. Yesterday, he hit my father when he tried to protect Avery." The officers exchanged a look. "Mr. Cross," Hayes said coldly, "we could arrest you right now based on this evidence. The only reason we're not is because your victims haven't pressed charges yet. But my wrist got broken when you assaulted an elderly man in his own home." Campbell interrupted. "You're lucky he didn't do worse. This is your only warning. If we get called back, you're going to jail." They left Damien holding his broken wrist, staring at the medical records that destroyed his victim's story. After the patrol car disappeared, the house fell silent, except for whispered conversations from Beverly and Brenda's room. That evening, I could hear Beverly and Brenda whispering frantically in the kitchen, plotting their next move. By dinner time, the Cross family had apparently decided on their strategy. Beverly emerged from her room with an almost cheerful demeanor, while Brenda actually managed what might have been a smile. Even Damien, despite his broken wrist, seemed more confident than he'd been since the police visit. "Ethan," Beverly called out in a honey-sweet voice that made my skin crawl. "Why don't you join us for dinner tonight? I made your favorite, chicken soup." Charlotte looked up from where she was feeding Avery, surprise flickering across her face. In all the years she'd lived here, Beverly had never once invited her father to eat with the family. "That's very kind of you," I replied carefully, taking a seat at the kitchen table. The bowl of soup Beverly placed in front of me smelled delicious, but something about her eager expression set off every alarm bell in my head. "Go on, try it," she urged, practically bouncing on her feet. "I put extra seasoning in it just for you." I lifted the spoon to my lips, pretending to take a sip, then suddenly jerked my elbow as if startled by a sound. The bowl went flying, soup splashing across the floor in a steaming puddle. "Oh no!" I exclaimed, jumping up. "I'm so sorry, Beverly. How clumsy of me." Her face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Disappointment, anger, then forced understanding. "Oh, it's fine. These things happen." But I caught the look that passed between her and Brenda. They'd been counting on that soup working. "I'll just make myself a sandwich," I said, cleaning up the mess. "Don't trouble yourself making another batch." The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. Around 10 o'clock, I announced I was tired and settled down on the living room couch, pulling a thin blanket over myself. Within minutes, I was breathing deeply and evenly, every appearance of a man fast asleep. But I wasn't sleeping. Every sense was heightened waiting. Around midnight, I heard the soft creak of floorboards. Someone was moving through the house, trying to be quiet. The footsteps paused outside the living room, then came closer. Through barely opened eyelids, I saw Damien's silhouette against the dim light from the hallway. Despite his injured wrist, he carried a coil of rope in his good hand. His face was set in grim determination as he approached the couch. He moved slowly, carefully, trying not to wake his intended victim. When he was close enough, he reached out to grab my shoulder. That's when I struck. My hand shot out and clamped around his throat before he could make a sound. His eyes went wide with shock and terror. As I sat up, my grip cutting off his air supply. "Going somewhere," I whispered. He tried to struggle, but 10 years of prison conditioning had given me strength he couldn't match, especially with one useless arm. Within seconds, he was unconscious. It took me less than 5 minutes to drag him into the bedroom and secure him to the bed frame with his own rope. I gagged him with a pillowcase to keep him quiet, then stepped back to admire my work. Now came the tricky part. I slipped out the bedroom's back door that led to the small yard, then crept around to the side of the house where Beverly and Brenda's room was located. Taking a deep breath, I began pounding on the wall and shouting at the top of my lungs. "Help Beverly, Brenda. He's beating me. Help me, please." I threw in some convincing groans, and the sound of furniture being knocked over really selling the performance. "He's gone crazy. He's going to kill me. Help." Within seconds, I heard footsteps rushing toward the bedroom. Beverly burst through the bedroom door, first clutching a wooden rolling pin like a weapon, her face twisted with savage glee. Right behind her came Brenda, wielding a metal mop handle with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment. "Where is he?" Beverly hissed, squinting into the dark room. "Where's that old bastard?" The bedroom was pitch black, except for a thin sliver of light from the hallway. On the bed, they could make out the silhouette of a figure tied down, and struggling, muffled sounds coming from behind what appeared to be a gag. "There," Brenda pointed with her makeshift weapon. "He's trying to get loose." What they couldn't see in the darkness was me crouched in the corner with my phone's camera recording everything. What they also couldn't see was that the person tied to the bed wasn't me at all. "This is for breaking Damien's wrist." Beverly raised the rolling pin above her head and brought it down hard across the figure's ribs. The muffled scream that followed should have given them pause, but they were too caught up in their bloodlust to notice it sounded wrong. "And this is for embarrassing our family." Brenda swung the mop handle like a baseball bat, connecting with what she thought was my shoulder, but was actually Damien's already injured arm. More muffled screaming, more desperate struggling against the ropes. "Hit him harder," Beverly panted, bringing the rolling pin down again and again. "Make him pay for thinking he could stand up to us." Brenda was in a frenzy now, raining blows on the helpless figure. "You think you're so tough now, old man? Not so tough when you can't fight back." The beating went on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. Both women were breathing hard sweat pouring down their faces as they took turns hitting their victim with everything they had. Finally, Beverly stepped back, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "I think he's learned his lesson. Should we untie him?" Brenda asked, still gripping her weapon. "Not yet. Let him think about what happens when he crosses the Cross family." That's when I stood up and flipped on the light switch. The sudden brightness made both women squint and shield their eyes. When their vision cleared, they found themselves staring at a scene that would haunt their nightmares forever. Damien lay tied to the bed, his face a mask of blood, and bruises his broken wrist bent at an impossible angle. His eyes were wide with pain and terror above the gag, and his chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow breaths. Beverly's rolling pin clattered to the floor. Brenda's mouth fell open in a perfect O of horror. "Surprise," I said calmly, holding up my phone with the camera still recording. "Say hello to the evidence." "Oh my God," Beverly whispered, staring at her unconscious son. "Oh my God, what have we done?" "What you've done," I corrected, "is commit aggravated assault with weapons. On camera. With clear audio of you admitting it was revenge." Brenda was shaking so hard she could barely stand. We thought, you said..." "I said Damien was beating me. You assumed I was the one tied up. That assumption just cost you both about 10 years in prison." Beverly fell to her knees beside the bed, reaching for Damien with trembling hands. "Baby, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean..." "Don't touch him," I snapped. "You've done enough damage." I held up the phone again, making sure they could see the red recording light. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm calling 911. You're both going to jail. And this video is going to make sure you stay there for a very long time." Both women were crying now, the reality of what they'd done finally sinking in. Within minutes, I was on the phone with 911 reporting a serious assault. The wail of sirens cut through the night air like a symphony of justice. Red and blue lights painted the narrow alley in strobing colors as 2 patrol cars and an ambulance squeezed into the cramped space in front of the house. Officer Hayes was the first through the door, his hand resting on his weapon, until he saw me standing calmly in the living room. Detective Campbell followed close behind, along with 2 paramedics wheeling a stretcher. "Mr. Miller, what's the situation?" "The situation," I said, holding up my phone, "is that I have video evidence of aggravated assault with deadly weapons." I led them to the bedroom where Beverly and Brenda sat huddled in the corner, still in shock from what they'd done. Damien lay unconscious on the bed, his breathing shallow and labored. "Jesus Christ," one of the paramedics muttered, immediately going to work checking Damien's vital signs. "This guy's in bad shape. Multiple contusions, possible internal bleeding, and this wrist is completely shattered." Detective Campbell looked at the blood-stained rolling pin and mop handle on the floor, then at the 2 women. "Ladies, you're under arrest for aggravated assault." "But we thought..." Beverly started to protest. "Ma'am, I don't care what you thought. You beat a man with weapons while he was tied to a bed. That's attempted murder in my book." Officer Hayes was already reading them their rights while fitting handcuffs around their wrists. Brenda was sobbing uncontrollably while Beverly kept staring at her unconscious son with horror. "The video shows everything," I told Detective Campbell, handing him my phone. "They came in with weapons, admitted it was revenge, and beat him for several minutes while he was helpless." Campbell watched the footage, his expression growing darker with each passing second. "This is some of the clearest evidence of assault I've ever seen. These women are going away for a long time." The paramedics loaded Damien onto the stretcher, working frantically to stabilize him. "We need to get him to Portland General immediately. He's got at least 3 broken ribs, and I'm worried about internal bleeding." As they wheeled him out, Beverly called out desperately, "Damien, baby, I'm sorry I didn't know it was you." "Save it for the judge," Officer Hayes said, guiding her toward the patrol car. Within an hour, the house was empty except for me, Charlotte Avery, and 1 very confused 5-year-old boy. Caleb stood in the middle of the living room, looking around at the bloodstains and overturned furniture, trying to process what had happened to his world. His grandmother and mother were gone, his uncle was in the hospital, and the old man he'd been bullying was suddenly in charge. "Where's my mom?" he asked in a small voice. "Your mom and grandma did something very bad?" I explained, crouching down to his level. "They hurt someone, so the police had to take them away." His lower lip started to tremble. For all his bratty behavior, he was still just a scared little kid whose world had just collapsed. "Am I in trouble too?" he whispered. "That depends," I said seriously. "Do you remember how you treated Avery?" He nodded, looking ashamed. And do you remember what I told you about how knights are supposed to behave? Another nod. Well, Caleb, here's the thing. Your mom and grandma are going to be gone for a while. That means you're going to be staying with us. And in this house, we have rules. I stood up and walked over to where Avery was peeking out from behind Charlotte's legs. Avery, I said formally, I hereby name you queen of this house. And Caleb, I turned back to the boy. You are now Sir Caleb, sworn to protect Queen Avery, and make sure she's happy and safe. Caleb's eyes widened. Despite everything, the idea of being a knight clearly appealed to him. What does a knight do? He asked. A knight shares his toys with the queen. A knight never pushes or hits the queen. A knight makes sure the queen gets the best food and the most comfortable chair. Can you do that, Sir Caleb? He looked over at Avery, who was watching him with cautious hope in her eyes. Yes, he said quietly, I can do that. 7 days after the assault, Damien limped through the front door with his arm in a sling and his ribs wrapped in bandages. Behind him shuffled Beverly and Brenda, both looking like they'd aged 10 years during their week in county jail. Their orange jumpsuits had been replaced with wrinkled clothes, but the defeated look in their eyes remained. Well, well, I said from my seat at the kitchen table where I'd been helping Avery with a coloring book. The gang's all here. Damien could barely look at me. His mother had beaten him so severely that he needed surgery to repair internal bleeding. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. We're back, he mumbled, avoiding eye contact. The charges were dropped when I refused to testify. How generous of you, I replied. But we need to talk about the new arrangement. I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter where I'd prepared a folder full of documents. Since you're all back, it's time to settle accounts. Beverly's eyes narrowed. What kind of accounts? Well, let's see. I opened the folder. 7 years of Charlotte paying rent on this house while you freeloaded. 7 years of medical bills from your son's abuse. 7 years of trauma therapy that my granddaughter is going to need. Pain and suffering. Emotional distress. I slid a piece of paper across the table. $400,000. That's what you owe this family. Damien's jaw dropped. 400,000? Are you insane? We don't have that kind of money. Then you'll get it. Liquidate your assets, get loans, sell whatever you own. I don't care how you do it, but you're going to pay. Brenda laughed bitterly. And if we don't? I held up my phone, showing the video that had already been copied to multiple cloud accounts. Then this goes viral on every social media platform. Your faces, your names, your voices admitting to assault. Good luck finding jobs or housing after that. The room fell silent except for the sound of Avery's crayons on paper. There's one more thing, I continued. Charlotte is divorcing you, Damien, today. The papers are already filed. Charlotte appeared from the bedroom dressed in clean clothes and carrying a small suitcase. For the first time in years, she stood up straight, her shoulders back, her head held high. I'm taking Avery and moving in with my father, she announced. The real one. What do you mean, the real one? Beverly asked suspiciously. That's when the front door opened one more time and Ethan walked in. My twin brother looked healthier than he had in years. His face filled out, his eyes bright and clear. Hello, everyone, he said with a smile. The doctors say I've made a remarkable recovery. Amazing what a week of peace and quiet can do for a man's mental health. The Cross family stared at him, then at me, then back at him, trying to process what they were seeing. You see, I explained, while you were busy destroying each other, my brother was getting the help he needed, and I was getting the justice my family deserved. Ethan walked over and put his arm around Charlotte. Come on, sweetheart, let's go home. As we prepared to leave, I turned back to the 3 broken people sitting at that kitchen table. You know, for 7 years you made my family's life hell because you thought you could. Because you thought we were weak. Because you thought nobody would stand up to you. I picked up Avery, who wrapped her arms around my neck trustingly. But here's what you never understood about family. When you hurt one of us, you hurt all of us. And when you threaten our children, you wake up something in us that you really don't want to meet. I looked each of them in the eye. Sometimes the people you think are weak are just waiting for the right moment to show you how strong they really are. We walked out of that house and never looked back. Charlotte got her divorce, we got our money, and Avery got the childhood she deserved. But most importantly, we got each other back. Because at the end of the day, family isn't just about blood. It's about who's willing to fight for you when the world gets dark. It's about who will swap places with you when you can't fight anymore. It's about love that's stronger than fear and courage that's deeper than anger. Looking back at this true story, I realize I became someone I never thought I'd be. 10 years in that hospital didn't break me. It forged me into a weapon. But here's the thing, don't become like me. Don't let anger consume you until violence becomes your only language. I spent a decade learning to control my rage, but the truth is, I should have learned to channel it differently. God gave us strength, not just to fight, but to protect. The lesson isn't that you need to break bones to defend your family. It's that you need to stand up before it gets that far. These grandpa stories we tell ourselves about being too old, too weak, too tired to make a difference. They're lies. Age doesn't make you powerless. It gives you wisdom. Experience doesn't make you fragile. It makes you dangerous to those who prey on the innocent. My advice: don't wait until your family is broken before you act. Don't let bullies convince you that keeping the peace means accepting abuse. And don't ever think that being gentle means being weak. This true story taught me that sometimes love looks like fury. Sometimes protecting your family means becoming the storm they fear. But God help me, I wish I'd found another way. The real lesson from these grandpa stories isn't about revenge. It's about recognition. Recognize the signs early. Speak up sooner. Get help before the situation explodes. Because once you cross that line I crossed, there's no going back to the man you used to be. Every family has someone like Ethan, someone gentle who needs protection, and every family needs someone willing to be the shield. Just try to be a smarter shield than I was. This true story changed all of us. I pray yours has a gentler ending. If this story made you think about the protectors in your own family, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below about a time someone stood up for you, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that matter. Sometimes the most powerful grandpa stories are the ones that remind us what we're truly capable of when love is on the line. He's getting older, more forgetful. We're concerned about his ability to maintain such a large property. My son Sterling told the real estate agent, not knowing I was listening. At Thanksgiving dinner, I proved just how sharp my memory really was, and destroyed their lives with one envelope. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, drop a comment with your location if you think family betrayal is the worst kind of betrayal. I never thought my own children would conspire to steal my home and ship me off to die in a nursing home, but here we are. My name is Harrison Clark, and I spent 40 years building bridges. I understand foundation stress points, how small cracks become catastrophic failures. What I missed were the fractures forming in my own family. This Victorian mansion has sheltered Clarks since 1897. When Martha died 8 years ago, I became its sole guardian, determined to keep her memory alive through tradition. Every Thanksgiving I'd open these doors like she did, welcoming our 3 children home to Bull Street. Garrett Sterling and Vivian would fill these rooms with laughter, just like the old days. For years it worked. The house breathed again. Martha's china sparkled, her recipes warmed the kitchen, and for precious moments, grief lifted like morning fog over the Savannah River. But foundations shift. What starts as settling becomes something more dangerous. I began noticing things an engineer notices. Load distributions, changing stress patterns, shifting. Phone calls that stopped when I entered rooms. Conversations about property values disguised as casual interest. Eyes that measured crown molding instead of admiring it. My children stopped seeing home. They started seeing assets. The house that had sheltered 4 generations was being appraised by the very people it had protected. The bridge I'd built between past and future was carrying traffic I never intended. This year felt different, though I couldn't calculate exactly why. Maybe it was Sterling's hushed phone calls, or how Amanda suddenly photographed rooms she'd ignored for decades. Maybe it was the way they looked at me. Not with the eyes of children seeing their father, but with the cold assessment of contractors evaluating a structure's remaining useful life. I'm 65, and I've learned that the most dangerous failures happen slowly and visibly, until one day the whole thing comes down. I should have run the calculations on my own family, should have tested the load-bearing capacity of blood and loyalty, but everything was about to change in ways I never imagined. Sometimes the bridge you think is solid has been quietly crumbling beneath your feet, and you don't realize it until you're already falling. For 8 years I welcomed them with open arms, never suspecting they saw my generosity as weakness. The deterioration was systematic, professional. 2015, Garrett brought flowers for Martha's grave. 2016, he brought a measuring tape. I watched my dining room become Sterling's war room. Papers scattered like battle plans, phone calls at midnight. My Persian rugs worn thin by his pacing. Just need backing, he'd mutter, staring at the crown molding like it held his salvation. Amanda started photographing everything. For memories, she claimed. But her eyes calculated square footage, not sentiment. Vivian perfected the art of strategic helplessness. Sweet smiles during dinner, mysterious headaches during cleanup. I'm just not good at that sort of thing, she'd whisper, vanishing upstairs while I scrubbed her children's fingerprints off Martha's piano. 4 days became 5. 5 became a week. My grocery bills tripled. They slept until noon, demanded fresh coffee, expected 3 meals prepared on schedule. I became the hired help in my own home. The questions started innocent enough. Dad, isn't this house too big? Have you thought about downsizing? What happens when you can't manage the maintenance? But their eyes told different stories. Sterling tested the banister's stability. Garrett measured window frames. They stopped asking about my health and started assessing my longevity. 2021 brought contractors. Friends, who happened to specialize in estate sales. 2022 brought real estate magazines left casually on my coffee table. They'd arrive expecting service leave, expecting inheritance. I cooked for 12, cleaned for 12, hosted for 12. They treated me like the caretaker of their future property. The breaking point came last Christmas, when I found Amanda in Martha's bedroom going through jewelry boxes. Just admiring Mom's taste, she said, but the appraisal app on her phone suggested otherwise. By 2022, I wasn't hosting family anymore. I was running a free resort for ungrateful strangers who happened to share my DNA. Something was shifting in the family dynamic, but I couldn't see it yet. Like metal fatigue, the damage was happening in places I couldn't measure until the day the whole structure would fail catastrophically. I just didn't know they'd already started the demolition. The first crack in their facade came on a sweltering August afternoon when I returned from the hardware store earlier than expected. That shifting dynamic I'd sensed was about to reveal itself in the most devastating way possible. I'd gone to Lowe's for weather stripping, the kind of maintenance task that keeps a 126-year-old house from falling apart. The Georgia heat was brutal even for late summer, and I'd cut my errands short when the humidity became unbearable. The front door opened silently. Something I'd always been proud of, those well-oiled hinges that Martha used to say made me sound like a ghost coming home. Today that silence would serve me in ways I never imagined. Sterling's voice drifted from my study, confident and businesslike. Yes, it's an 1897 Victorian in the historic district. Prime location, original hardwood throughout. Current market value easily $2.8 million. I froze in the hallway, shopping bag still in hand. He's getting older, more forgetful. We're concerned about his ability to maintain such a large property. Sterling's tone was clinical, detached, like he was discussing a deteriorating building, not his father. The voice on the other end was tinny through the speakerphone, professional. Market timing is crucial. Fall's typically best for this demographic. Buyers are thinking about settling before the holidays. My legs felt unsteady. I pressed against the wall, hidden by the curve of the staircase. We've researched assisted living facilities, Sterling continued. Sunset Manor has excellent reviews. Full care, beautiful grounds. He'd be much happier there. Catherine's voice joined the conversation. When can you come do a full assessment? We'd prefer to handle this before he gets too attached to staying. Too attached? To my own home. The family agrees it's what's best for everyone involved, Sterling said with the authority of someone who'd never asked what I wanted. I backed away slowly, my engineer's precision failing me for the first time in decades. My hands shook as I set the bag down in the kitchen, the weather strippings scattered across Martha's counter, like evidence of my own obsolescence. Sterling was pricing my life like a commodity. Not just the house, me, my independence, my memories, my remaining years. He'd calculated my worth down to the dollar and found me expendable. This wasn't spontaneous concern for an aging father. This was premeditation, planning. They'd been discussing my future without me making decisions about where I'd live, how I'd die, what would happen to everything Martha and I had built together. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was the casual efficiency of it. Sterling discussed shipping me off to Sunset Manor like he was arranging storage for unwanted furniture. In that moment, I understood that my children weren't visiting their father anymore. They were appraising their inheritance, and I was just an obstacle to liquidation. I needed to know how deep this betrayal went, and whether it was just about greed or something far worse. Helen approached me nervously that September morning, clutching something that would change everything. 2 weeks had passed since I'd overheard Sterling's real estate conversation, and I'd been studying my children like structural blueprints, looking for signs of deeper damage. I should have known Helen would be the one to show me just how far the foundation had already cracked. She'd been part of our family longer than some marriages last, arriving each morning with the quiet efficiency Martha had always appreciated. This morning, her usual calm was replaced by something I'd never seen before. Fear. "Mr. Clark," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to see." She handed me a manila folder, her hands trembling slightly. "I found these in Sterling's briefcase when I was cleaning the guest room yesterday. I didn't understand what they meant, but the documents inside made my blood run cold. Mortgage papers, official bank letterhead. My name typed neatly at the top, but the signature at the bottom belonged to someone else entirely. "That's not my handwriting," I said, though we both knew it already. I grabbed the phone and dialed First National, my hands steadier than they had any right to be. Years of crisis management on construction sites had taught me to function even when everything was falling apart. "There's been some kind of mistake with my mortgage," I told the loan officer. "No mistake, Mr. Clark. Your home equity loan was approved 3 months ago. $120,000. Your son Sterling presented all the proper power of attorney documents." The room tilted. "I never signed any power of attorney." The silence on the other end stretched like a cable under too much tension. "Sir, I think you need to come in immediately." Helen's voice cut through my shock. "Mr. Clark, there's more." She pulled out her phone, showing me a notepad where she'd been tracking something. "Sterling's been getting calls from cryptocurrency exchanges. Angry calls. I heard him crying on the phone with Catherine last week." "He lost it all, didn't he?" She nodded. "Every penny. And now—" She gestured at the mortgage papers. I called the bank back. "What happens if this loan isn't repaid? If payment isn't received within 60 days, we'll begin foreclosure proceedings." "I'm sorry, Mr. Clark, but the paperwork appears to be in order from our end." 60 days. Sterling had put my home, Martha's home, 4 generations of family history, at risk for cryptocurrency speculation. He'd forged my signature, fabricated legal documents, and gambled away money that was never his to begin with. Helen sat quietly while I processed the magnitude of what my son had done. Not just planning to steal my house? He'd already stolen it. The deed might still have my name, but the bank owned it now, thanks to Sterling's fraud. "What kind of man steals from his own father?" I asked the empty room. "The desperate kind," Helen answered softly. "But Mr. Clark, desperate men do desperate things. If he's willing to forge your signature—" She didn't need to finish. If Sterling would commit mortgage fraud, what else was he capable of? My son hadn't just planned to steal my house. He'd already stolen it. And now I had 60 days to figure out how to save everything Martha and I had built, or watch it disappear, to pay for his gambling debts. I needed time to process this devastating betrayal, but time was the one thing Sterling's greed had stolen from me, too. While searching for the original mortgage papers, I found something that took my breath away. Processing Sterling's devastating betrayal had consumed my days, but I needed those original property documents to prove the mortgage fraud. Martha's antique secretary desk, the one she'd inherited from her grandmother, seemed the logical place to start. I'd avoided that desk for 8 years. Too many memories lived in those drawers. Too much of Martha's essence still lingered in the careful organization of her papers. But desperation makes you brave, and Sterling's 60-day deadline left no room for sentiment. The main drawers held what I expected: insurance policies, tax records, the mundane paperwork of a life well lived. But as I searched deeper, my fingers found something unusual, a hidden compartment I'd never known existed. Inside lay a sealed envelope, Martha's handwriting unmistakable across the cream-colored paper, to be opened only if our children prove unworthy of our love, Martha. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Martha's real will, dated 1 week before her death, written in her careful script, with the precision of someone who knew time was running out. "My dearest Harrison," it began, "if you're reading this, then our fears about the children have proven true. I've watched them change these past few years, seen the way they look at our home at us. If they have forgotten the values we taught them, if love has been replaced by greed, then all our assets should go where they'll do the most good, to children who have nothing." The legal language was clear and binding. If Harrison determines that our children have forgotten that love without respect is not love at all, Then all property, investments, and assets shall transfer immediately to children's charities in the Savannah area. Martha knew. Somehow my brilliant wife had seen this day coming and prepared for it. I found more evidence in her files. Correspondence with children's hospitals, meetings with lawyers I'd never met, conversations about establishing trusts. The will my children had shown me after her funeral was a forgery. They'd hidden Martha's true wishes and created their own version, one that guaranteed their inheritance, regardless of their behavior. The next morning I drove to James Patterson's law office downtown. He was Martha's choice, not mine. A man whose reputation for integrity was legendary in Savannah's legal circles. I need to execute my late wife's true wishes, I told him, placing Martha's will on his mahogany desk. Patterson read carefully, his expression growing more serious with each paragraph. This is ironclad, Mr. Clark. Your wife was very thorough. That afternoon I met with the Savannah Children's Hospital Foundation. The development director, a kind woman with gentle eyes, smiled sadly when I introduced myself. Mrs. Clark spoke with us several times before she passed, she said. She hoped it would never be necessary, but she wanted everything in place just in case. She said she'd rather help children who had nothing than reward children who had forgotten everything. October flew by in a blur of legal preparations. Every document had to be perfect, every contingency planned. Martha had given me the perfect weapon against my children's greed, but I had to wield it carefully. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Sterling was forging documents to steal from me, I was preparing documents to honor my wife's deepest wishes. While he was destroying our family's foundation, I was building something that would last beyond all of us. Martha had given me the perfect way to honor her memory and teach our children the lesson they desperately needed. This Thanksgiving would be unlike any other in our family's history. Martha's final gift would either save our family or finish what Sterling's greed had started. Either way, justice would finally be served. Thanksgiving morning felt like the calm before a storm that had been 8 years in the making. The dining room had never looked more elegant. Helen had outdone herself with the table setting. Martha's finest china gleaming under the crystal chandelier, autumn centerpieces arranged with mathematical precision. Enough place settings for the family that was about to implode. Unlike any other Thanksgiving in our history, this one would end everything. They arrived in high spirits, laughing and joking as they filled the foyer with coats and conversation. Sterling seemed particularly jovial, practically bouncing on his heels as he surveyed the rooms. Dad's finally seeing reason about downsizing, he whispered to Catherine loud enough for me to hear. This place will bring a fortune. Garrett nodded approvingly at Amanda's latest photographs of the crown molding. The market timing couldn't be better. Even Vivian seemed lighter, as if a great weight was about to be lifted from her shoulders. They had no idea they were walking into their own judgment day. Dinner proceeded normally. Turkey carved with precision sides, passed with practiced courtesy small talk flowing like wine. They complimented Helen's cooking, admired the autumn decorations, discussed everything except what they'd really come for. As we finished dessert, I stood slowly, my engineer's mind calculating the exact moment for maximum impact. Before we give thanks, I said, my voice cutting through their comfortable chatter, we need to address some truths. The room stilled. Sterling's fork froze halfway to his mouth. I've asked my attorney to join us as a witness to what happens next. I gestured to James Patterson, who stepped forward from the hallway where he'd been waiting. Sterling's face drained of color. Dad, what's going on? Sterling, I said, placing the mortgage documents on the table like evidence in a trial. Would you like to explain the $120,000 mortgage you forged against my house? The silence was deafening. Catherine's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against Martha's china plate. I can explain, Sterling stammered, but his voice cracked like a teenager caught stealing. You gambled away $120,000 of stolen money on cryptocurrency? I continued, my voice steady as bedrock. Money you obtained by forging my signature and fabricating power of attorney documents. Garrett shot to his feet. I had no knowledge of this. I'm an officer of the court. Sterling, you promised me you'd tell him. Catherine hissed, tears streaming down her face. But I wasn't finished. There's something else you should know, I said, producing Martha's sealed envelope. Your mother's real will. I read Martha's words aloud, her voice seeming to fill the room from beyond the grave. Love without respect is not love at all. If our children have forgotten the values we taught them, all assets shall go to children's charities. Vivian's sob broke the silence. We never saw this will. Because you hid it, I replied, and forged a fake one, just like Sterling forged the mortgage papers. The charity representative stepped forward as I'd arranged. Following Martha's wishes and my own conscience, I'm donating this house and my entire estate to the Savannah Children's Hospital Foundation. The words hit them like a physical blow. Amanda clutched her chest. Douglas gripped the table for support. Sterling looked like he might vomit. And Sterling, I added, meeting his terrified eyes, the FBI will be very interested in your mortgage fraud. James has already made the call. The moment of complete silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was the sound of a family destroying itself of greed, finally meeting consequences of Martha's wisdom, proving itself from beyond the grave. The silence that followed was deafening. Not just quiet, but the complete absence of everything that had once made us a family. The explosion that followed wasn't just anger, it was pure desperate panic. That deafening silence shattered like glass as the full weight of their situation hit them. This wasn't a family disagreement anymore. This was financial ruin, criminal charges, and the complete destruction of everything they'd counted on. Sterling was the first to crack. "Dad, I can explain. I was going to tell you." His voice pitched higher with each word like a man drowning in his own lies. "We needed the money." Catherine screamed, her composure completely gone. Sterling's business was failing. We had creditors calling every day, but Garrett, ever the lawyer, immediately went into self-preservation mode. I knew nothing about mortgage fraud. I'm an officer of the court. I could be disbarred. Amanda's face twisted with rage. "This is insane. You can't just give away our children's inheritance. We have rights." "Daddy, please." Vivian dissolved into tears, her gentle facade crumbling. "We never meant to hurt you. We were just worried about you being alone in this big house." Douglas tried to play peacemaker, his voice shaking. "Maybe we should call this off talk privately, work something out." But I remained perfectly calm, Martha's strength flowing through me like steel reinforcement. In concrete, "Your mother predicted this exact moment," I said, pulling out more of Martha's letter. She wrote, "When confronted with their greed, they will blame everyone but themselves. They will claim victimhood while victimizing others. They will demand rights they never earned and love they never gave." The accuracy of Martha's predictions was devastating. Every word she'd written was playing out exactly as she'd foreseen. Their desperation escalated like a building under too much stress. "We'll contest this," Garrett shouted, his professional composure shattered. "You're not mentally competent. No court will uphold this. You're destroying the family over money." Sterling accused, the irony completely lost on him. "What about the grandchildren?" Vivian pleaded, trying one last manipulation. "They're innocent. You're punishing them for our mistakes." I stood up slowly, my engineer's mind calculating the exact moment for my final words. "You wanted my house so badly?" I said, my voice carrying the authority of 4 decades, building things that last. "You forgot I was still living in it." The room fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of defeat, not shock. "Get out," I said quietly. "All of you. And don't come back until you remember what family actually means." James Patterson stepped forward, his presence a reminder that this wasn't just family drama anymore. It was a legal matter. "The FBI will want to interview Sterling within the week," he said matter-of-factly. That's when the real panic set in. Sterling's face went gray. Catherine started hyperventilating. Even Garrett looked terrified, realizing his brother's crimes could splash onto his legal career. They left in stages like a building collapsing floor by floor. Sterling stumbled out first, Catherine supporting his shaking frame, both of them destroyed by the weight of criminal consequences. Garrett tried to maintain some dignity, but his parting threat fell flat. "This isn't over, Dad. We'll fight this." Vivian was the last to leave, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Daddy," she whispered, but even that felt calculated now. As I watched them drive away, Sterling's car weaving slightly, Garrett's tires squealing, Vivian's brake lights disappearing into the Savannah twilight, I wondered if I'd just saved my family or destroyed it forever. Helen appeared beside me, her loyal presence steady as always. "You did what Mrs. Martha would have wanted," she said softly. "Only time would tell if I'd made the right choice, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally building something instead of watching it crumble. 12 months of traveling the world had given me perspective, but coming home to Savannah felt like stepping into a completely different life. The house looked exactly as I'd left it, maintained with the same care Helen had always shown, but now under the gentle stewardship of the Children's Hospital Foundation. They'd honored their promise. I could live here as caretaker for as long as I needed tending to the place that had shaped 4 generations of Clarks. Whether I'd made the right choice would be answered by the 3 separate phone calls I'd received during my last week in Scotland. Vivian came, first arriving on a crisp November afternoon, with none of the helpless fragility I remembered. She walked differently now, shoulders back, eyes direct, like someone who'd finally learned to carry her own weight. I divorced Douglas, she said without preamble, settling into Martha's favorite chair. I finally stood up for myself like you taught me that Thanksgiving. She told me about her new job teaching at an inner-city school, working with children who had nothing but still managed to smile. Working with kids who have nothing taught me what really matters. Mom's letter was right about all of us. Garrett arrived the next day looking older, but somehow more solid. The arrogance was gone, replaced by humility. I lost several major clients. Amanda filed for separation. I spent a year in therapy, Dad, learning that my worth isn't my wealth. His voice broke slightly. The grandchildren ask about you constantly. I want to earn back the right to be your son. Sterling came last, arriving alone in a beat-up pickup truck, his transformation the most dramatic of all. He'd lost significant weight, his face weathered by honest work and honest consequences. Dad, I served 6 months in minimum security. Federal prison. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. He sat heavily in the chair where he'd once plotted my future. The first month I was angry at everyone but myself. Blamed you for being unreasonable. Blamed Catherine for not supporting me. Blamed the system for being unfair. Then my cellmate, an old man named Frank, who'd embezzled from his church, asked me a simple question. What did you build, son? I told him about my failed businesses, my schemes, my plans. He just shook his head. Sterling's voice grew quiet. Frank said, I asked what you built, not what you took. In 63 years, I never built anything that lasted. Just took from people who trusted me. That night I couldn't sleep. I started reading in prison, not business books or get-rich schemes, but books about character, about integrity. I wrote letters to you I never sent apologizing for things I didn't even realize I'd done wrong. The work detail was kitchen duty. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. washing dishes, mopping floors, serving food to men who'd made the same mistakes I had. My hands bled the first week. I'd never done real work before. Catherine visited once in month 3. She looked at me through that glass partition and said, I don't know who you are anymore. I told her I'm finally becoming who I should have been all along. She never came back. Sterling showed me his hands. Calloused, scarred, honest. I'm working construction now, Dad. 40 hours a week of real work building things instead of tearing them down. I'm paying back every penny, even if it takes 20 years. I never thanked you for not pressing additional charges. The prosecutor said you could have sent me away for 5 years, but you chose mercy over justice. His voice shook. I forgot everything you and Mom taught me about earning things instead of taking them. Prison taught me the difference. For the first time in years, I saw my children. Not their greed, not their schemes, just the people I'd raised before wealth and expectation corrupted them. Maybe it was time to see if Martha's plan had worked, if redemption earned through suffering could rebuild what betrayal had destroyed. This Thanksgiving felt different, not because of the house or the money, but because of the people sitting around Martha's table. Martha's plan had worked in ways I was only beginning to understand. The dining room looked exactly the same. Helen had maintained every detail with loving precision, but the energy was completely transformed. Instead of 12 place settings for people who felt entitled to be there, we had 8 for people who understood the meaning of gratitude. Sterling arrived first carrying a homemade pumpkin pie that looked slightly lopsided but smelled like heaven. I learned to cook in prison, he said with a shy smile that reminded me of the boy he'd once been. Frank taught me his grandmother's recipe. Said a man who can't feed himself can't feed his family either. Garrett came next with his children, but these weren't the spoiled, destructive kids I remembered. Tyler held the door for his sister Emma, and both of them asked permission before sitting down. Dad says we acted spoiled before, Tyler said seriously. We want to earn our allowance now, Grandpa. Emma nodded earnestly. and we learned to say thank you for real, not just because grown-ups make us. Vivian was the last to arrive, but she moved through the house with purpose, immediately beginning to organize the serving dishes and coordinate with Helen. "I'm not the helpless little girl anymore," she said, tying on one of Martha's old aprons. "Prison taught Sterling to cook, divorce taught me to take care of myself." As we sat down to dinner, I noticed something remarkable. They were all helping. Sterling carved the turkey with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to value every resource. Garrett served wine but monitored his own consumption. Vivian made sure everyone had what they needed before sitting down herself. The conversation was different too. Instead of surface pleasantries, they asked real questions. About my travels, yes, but also about my health. My loneliness during the year away, my hopes for the future. "Tell us about Scotland, Dad," Garrett said. "What was your favorite part?" "The people," I answered honestly. Everywhere I went, I met families who'd been through hard times but stuck together. It made me realize something important. I stood up, feeling Martha's presence as strongly as if she were standing beside me. "The charity has agreed to let the family buy back the house," I announced, "but only if you can prove you understand its real value." Their faces showed hope, but not the desperate greed I'd seen before. "It's not about the money," I continued. "It's about the memories we make here, the values we pass down, the love we choose to give and receive." I pulled out the final page of Martha's letter, the one I'd saved for this moment. "Your mother wrote, 'True inheritance isn't money, it's character. The greatest gift parents can give is teaching children their own worth and the understanding that love must be earned and maintained.'" Sterling wiped his eyes. "We forgot that, didn't we?" "For a while," I admitted. "But forgetting isn't permanent if you're willing to remember." Helen appeared in the doorway, watching our family, with the satisfied expression of someone who'd witnessed a small miracle. "Mrs. Martha would be proud," she said softly. As we cleaned up together, really together with everyone contributing, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. I didn't lose my family that Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I found them. Sometimes love means letting people fall so they can learn to stand. Sometimes the greatest kindness is refusing to enable weakness. The greatest inheritance I could leave them wasn't this house or any amount of money. It was the knowledge of their own worth and the understanding that love, real love, must be earned, maintained, and never taken for granted. Martha had been right about everything, even from beyond the grave. Especially from beyond the grave. Looking back on this journey, I realize I made a crucial mistake that nearly cost me everything I held dear. I waited too long to set boundaries with my children. For 8 years I confused enabling with loving, mistaking their comfort for my success as a father. Don't be like me. Don't wait until your family treats your generosity as weakness before you act. Love without respect isn't love at all. It's a transaction that will bankrupt your soul. The hardest lesson I learned is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices. When I discovered my children's betrayal, I felt like God was testing my faith in the very values Martha and I had tried to instill. But God has a way of working through our darkest moments. Doesn't He? Martha's hidden will wasn't just legal preparation, it was divine wisdom. She understood that true inheritance isn't money or property, but character and integrity. These grandpa stories we tell ourselves about family loyalty can become dangerous when they prevent us from demanding basic respect. This true story taught me that boundaries aren't walls. They're bridges to healthier relationships. When my children hit rock bottom, they finally looked up. Sterling's time in prison, Garrett's therapy, Vivian's newfound independence. These weren't punishments, they were God's way of redirecting their paths. The most powerful grandpa stories aren't about spoiling grandchildren or keeping peace at any cost. They're about teaching the next generation that love must be earned and maintained. Every true story of family struggle has the potential for redemption if we're brave enough to demand better. As I finish sharing these grandpa stories, I'm grateful for every painful moment. This true story of our family's breakdown and rebuilding proves that it's never too late to choose respect over comfort. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children is letting them fall so they can learn to stand. If my story resonates with your heart, please share your own experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace and demanding respect in your family? Share this story with someone who might need to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that remind us what truly matters in this world.